Good evening and welcome. Holy Blossom Temple acknowledges that the land on which we greet you from is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Keret, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We pay respect and honor their histories, traditions, and continuous living cultures, and commit to accountability, respectful relations, and friendship. On behalf of the Holy Blossom Israel Engagement Committee and the Holy Blossom Center for Contemporary Jewish Literature, we are delighted to have you join us this evening. My name is Cynthia Good. This two-part event is made possible by a generous gift of sponsorship from Bonnie Lawrence Shear in memory of Mel Shear, and in honor of their shared love of Israel and Israeli authors, and by a generous gift of sponsorship from Jason Rosen. And this event sponsorship is also partially funded by a gift from members who prefer to be anonymous. And with thanks to the Toronto Jewish Film Festival as our promotional partners. We are so grateful for all of the generous support. Yesterday's interview with Etgar Keret was amazing. He was authentic and funny and personally revealing. But if you couldn't be with us, don't worry. You have received a link to the recording and you will be able to see and hear Etgar Keret in conversation with Sarah Levitt, who did a great job asking all of the right questions. My personal thanks to all involved with the organizing of this two-part event, Rabbi Goodman, Les Rothschild, Gillian Helfield, and Naomi Hoffman. And now I'll introduce your host for the evening, Dr. Gillian Helfield. Dr. Gillian Helfield is an associate professor in cinema and media studies at York University. Prior to embarking on a full-time teaching career, Gillian worked in the Canadian film and television industry as a freelance production coordinator and production manager. For the past 3 years, she has been a programmer for the Toronto Jewish Film Festival. At Holy Blossom, she is the chair of the Adult Education Committee. And some of you may know her as the host of the bi-weekly HBT Zoom program, What I'm Watching, where she discusses films and television with her fellow media buffs. Gillian, over to you.
Thank you, Cynthia, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to everyone who helped to bring this event together, especially Etgar Keret, but also all of you who are here in attendance. Welcome. In a few moments, we'll watch the documentary Etgar Keret, based on a true story, directed by Stefan Kass in 2017. And his last name is actually Kass, K-A-S, not Haas. Here's how things will work. We'll watch the film together in this webinar, and then at the end of my little intro, I'll suggest a topic for you to discuss in the breakout rooms. Then you'll leave the webinar and go to the Zoom link that was sent to you by email. And for your convenience, we've also posted a one-click Zoom link in the chat for you. When you click on that, you'll be prompted, you'll be asked whether you want to leave the meeting and join another one, and say yes. And that will take you into the Zoom meeting where then you will be put into breakout rooms. I will repeat the discussion topic and it will be posted in the chat. And of course, you're welcome to discuss other things that you like about the film. And I'm sure that the film will raise a number of interesting topics for you to discuss amongst yourselves. Then at the end, we'll all come back to the main room for the program closing. So just before we begin the screening, I want to say a couple of things about the film. It was made by two filmmakers, actually, Stefan Kass and Rutger Lem, who you will see in the opening sequence. And in keeping with Keret's work as a writer and a humorist, the filmmakers have created a documentary which brings together various media and cinematic approaches, including live action, interviews, and animation in the film's exploration of Keret's psyche. The style of the film emulates in many ways the surrealist style and perspective of Keret's work in its constant contemplation of the absurdities of daily life. We are also invited into Keret's personal world, through which are interwoven many different strands of his family history and life experience, and these contribute to his unique vision and sense of himself in the world. We can say that throughout his life and career, and as a child and a parent himself, he has perpetually questioned the ideas of borders and boundaries, particularly those between reality and the imagination. In fact, he has often compared his stories to dreams, which in part explains their meandering and often non-linear style, in which events lead from one to the next, and of course, the unexpected twists at the end. He also compares his stories to games, which, like dreams, are also organic, and from which he says you can learn something about yourself in certain situations. And Keret says he has learned a great deal about himself through his stories. In many ways, these have provided him with an outlet through which to express complex feelings or to process traumatic experiences. It also provided an outlet for his parents, who were both Holocaust survivors, and passed on this coping mechanism and talent to their son, Etgar. With this in mind, his name Etgar translates to challenge, which becomes all the more significant, pointing both to the circumstances surrounding his birth, but also the trajectory of his life's work, in which, as I mentioned, he's continually pushing against borders and boundaries which would otherwise constrain and suppress his vivid imagination and that unique relationship to his environment and the world. I'm going to end here because I'd like to save some time for the film and discussion afterward. I'll see you a bit later in the breakout rooms following the screening. But here's the topic that you can think about while you're watching the film and discuss later. Think about the meaning of the film's title, based on a true story. How does this title relate to the style of the film and its subject matter, storytelling? And how does truth relate to Keret's work and to this film, which is a documentary and which is supposed to be based in fact and reality? And with that, I leave you to watch the film. Enjoy. We'll see you later.
Thank you. So what is the purpose of your trip to Israel?
We're shooting this documentary.
Shooting.
Oh no, it's
No, like shooting with a camera.
like filming. You know, it's. This really happened.
What is this film about?
It's about Etgar Keret, the writer.
Do you know him?
If I know Etgar Keret, everybody in Israel know Etgar Keret.
This is a film about Etgar Keret. This guy, who really likes jumping in the air. As a teenager, I fell in love with his short stories, because they're weird and inventive, but unpretentious. And they're really short. Maybe that's what makes his book so popular worldwide. A Polish architect even built the narrowest house in the world in his honor. It's like his stories, very compact. His brother is a pro-marijuana activist who used to live in a treehouse in Thailand, while his sister became ultra-Orthodox and lives in Jerusalem, with her 14 children and 8 grandchildren. His best friend is a guy named Uzi, yes, like the machine gun, an IT millionaire who invented the hydro vibrator.
When you put it on the clitoris, it gives a good orgasm and you finish, and then back to normal.
He also made a film with his wife Shira, which won the Camera d'Or in Cannes. I know it just means golden camera, but it sounds sexier in French. This is Etgar Keret's nail clipper. The New York Times called him a genius, and others agree.
The thing I like about him also is he doesn't take literature too seriously.
So that's who we're talking about.
Sir, Mister, hey, what's wrong with him?
I think he's still stuck in the intermezzo. Stefan, we're doing.
Yeah.
I still don't get why would 2 Dutch guys go all the way to Israel to make a film about Etgar Keret? This sounds like a make-believe story. Your story doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but it's the truth, sir. I'm
Is
sorry.
it?
Yeah?
You can prove it. What is your favorite story by Edgar Keret?
I think it's there will be Fatso.
Is it?
Yeah.
Tell me, let's hear you.
Okay. Okay, it's a story about a guy who meets a girl. Beautiful girl. They have a great time. They fall in love, but she never sleeps over.
And then this surreal switch happens, you know, which is typical for Etgar stories. They always have a...
Was I talking to you?
No.
Okay. One day she says, "What if I told you I turn into a small, hairy, fat guy every night?" The guy thinks she's just trying to test him to see if he really loves her. So he says, "Of course I won't leave you. I love you." And this time, unlike all the other nights, she stays over. In the middle of the night, he wakes up. He goes to the living room, where he finds the small, hairy man watching football. It's a little awkward, but the night goes on. They eat falafel, drink beer, and gradually become friends. So, in the daytime, he spends time with the woman he loves so much, and at night, he has fun with his fatso. And go.
Your stories are a combination of a very grounded realism and also sort of surrealistic elements. How did that style come into existence?
My parents would always make up the bedtime stories they would tell me because when my mother was a child, she was in the ghetto, and when her parents would tell her bedtime stories, they would have no books to read from. My mother had lost her parents during the war, so this was one of her best memories from them. And she told herself that when she'll have a family, she'll make sure that she'll make up stories for her children every night. My mother's style was really very fantastical stories that take place, in a forest with fairies. And my father's stories were much more hardcore. They usually took place in a whorehouse. The characters were usually like mafia people, prostitutes, drunk people. And of course, at that age, when I was 5 and he would tell me those stories, I didn't know what a mafia person means, or what a drunk means, or what a prostitute means. And when I would ask him, he would say that a prostitute is somebody who gets paid to listen to other people's problems. Mafia people are people who collect rents from apartments they don't own. And drunk people are people who have these physical conditions that the more liquids they drink, the happier they become.
He has a lot of stories, but it's not necessarily because more things happen to him, although it sort of seems that way sometimes. I think he's very attentive to the stories that life has to offer. He recognizes when a story's happening, whereas for most of us, we go about our days and think nothing happened, and he always knows when something's happening.
He deals with the absurdity of daily life. All I ever tell my writing students is, it's about having a strong voice. If you discover your own strong voice, you can do whatever the hell you want. You can write about, one of my students was writing about gay dragons. Great, I love gay dragons. But as long as the voice that you deploy has something of yourself inside it. And Edgar always does.
My father told me many bedtime stories when I was a kid. The bedtime stories that my father would tell me were basically stories of people that he knew. As a child, I never felt that he was telling me stories that children should not be told. Because the ways that he told those stories, they always kind of emphasized the human side of the people. There was something very Hasidic in them. So he would tell me a story about somebody who did something wrong but felt bad about doing something wrong. And in the end, like every character that he talked about, I felt that he could have been my friend or he could have been a pal. So I think that for me, writing is a place in general in which you advocate for mankind. And I think it's quite a wonder that after seeing all this, that she and my father, who was also a Holocaust survivor and who lost his sister and who had survived by hiding for 610 days in a hole in the ground, that they became such optimistic people.
So my parents had met for the first time almost 60 years ago. My father was an electrician at the time, and he just finished this big project, and he got a fat paycheck, and he wanted to celebrate it. So we invited some of his friends to this great Romanian restaurant, and they would eat and drink and have a wonderful time. And there was a gypsy band there playing loud music, and everybody was very happy. But what happened was that gradually, one by one, all of his friends got too drunk or too tired and had left him, and he had found himself in the end the last patron in the restaurant. And the owner wanted to close the restaurant, but my father still wanted to celebrate, so he didn't lose his coolness, and he hired the entire gypsy band to become his own private band for that night.
And even the parrots that seemed to be very noisy in the restaurant was restful here next to the beach. You could see a police car stopping nearby, but this seemed to have nothing to do with him, so he just kept on peeing. But maybe it did have something to do with him because those policemen were dragging him, and as they were dragging him, he realized that he was peeing on the wall of the French embassy, and that with all the gypsy music and this peeing, they thought it was some kind of a political protest, and now they wanted to arrest him. But he spoke to the nice policeman, and he explained to them that this was all a misunderstanding. He didn't do anything wrong. So the police, they went to arrest the gypsy band, but the gypsy band, they were not like my father. They were not drunk, so they were putting a fight. But at some stage, he got too bored, and he got outside of the police car again. And among the bystanders who came to see what was going on, he saw this beautiful woman. And he came to her and he introduced himself. He said, "Hi, my name is Inspector Ephraim. I'm serving the police force, and I need to have your details." And my mother said, "I didn't see anything." And he said, "I'm sorry, lady. I have to take the details of all the people around here." And he wrote down all her details. And just as they were beginning to have a nice small talk, the policeman had noticed that he had left the police car, and and they caught him again and threw him aggressively in. And they didn't stay for another moment. They just drove away, and my father could see from the window of his car my mother, and my mother could see him too, and I bet she was very worried, thinking that she gave all her details to a crazy killer just arrested by the police. But luckily, the next day, after he sobered up, when he called her, she agreed to meet him. And I guess this is how I was born. My name Etgar means challenge. My mother had me in an old age, and I had all kinds of medical issues because the umbilical cord was tied around my neck, and I had the jaundice, so this
disease when your skin turns yellow, and the doctor said that I'm going to die, so they wanted her to have an abortion just so she won't be in a dangerous spot, but she insisted on having me anyway. So I was born in a cesarean operation in 6 months, weighing less than a kilo. And when I was born, my mother said that the doctors were sure I was going to die within a week or two. So she called me a challenge because it was a challenge to have me, and it would be a challenge for me to stay alive.
He was a dreamer and a reader, mostly comics, books. This is how he learned English. He had a catalog he used to order in America, whatever.
I think he was like a geek most of his childhood. Like he wasn't like part of a gang. He would be like this weirdo outsider who would read comics.
He was very much afraid of the world. He used to stay at home all the time.
And he knows that words is his best territory. So maybe that's kind of a strategy he built up growing up as a small kid. And he said, I'm good with words. I'm not going to fight because they're all going to kill me. I'm going to talk so much. I'm going to dazzle them with my talking. And this way I'm going to survive.
When I met him, I was a little bit shocked because I didn't expect. He seemed like a boy a little bit, you know. He always looked younger to his age. And Edgar loved to talk about soccer and football, and he wasn't typically what I mentioned, you know, the so-called writer is. You know, a writer writes books.
When I was a kid, my mom said, whenever it rains, you don't have to go to school. And I said, why? And she said, they don't teach you anything important enough to get wet for. When you play a game and they tell you there are no rules, you know, while all the other kids were playing soccer or basketball or handball, we were on the pitch and we had a ball, and they say you can touch it with your head and with your feet. You can decide that if people score goals, if you lose, then you actually win. So I think she kind of raised us with this kind of feeling that the word serves your imagination.
So I began writing during my compulsory army service. In Israel, everybody has to serve for 3 years. And in my case, I must say that these were probably the 3 worst years of my life. I think that everything that my parents, my family taught me, you know, they trained me for 18 years to become a crap soldier, because the whole idea about being a soldier is kind of losing your individuality, conforming, trying to hide everything that is different in you, you know. You have to shut up when something doesn't seem right, you know, and all those kind of things were things that I wasn't very good at. And very naturally, I got into trouble almost everywhere I interacted with other officers and soldiers. And luckily, you know, my 2 best friends, Uzi and Oren, they served in a computer unit, and they were able to get me into that unit. And I would do those kind of 24 hours or 48-hour shift in this computer room. The room, it looked better than this room, but not much. So during our army service, at some point, Oren got really, really depressed. And me and Uzi, we got word about him because he started talking about considering suicide. And at some stage, they even took his rifle away from him, you know, and excused him from guard duties. But at some point, the army psychiatrist decided that he's fit to go back into guard duty shift. And I actually volunteered to stay at the same time just so we can be together, because I thought it would be bad for him. And it was during Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement, where basically we were in the computer room and I had to take care of something. And when I came back, I found him,
in a pool of blood after he shot himself. I was very, very close to him, and this idea, this kind of question is, why did he kill himself and why am I still alive, was something that was always in the air. Especially when, you know, when I was very unhappy, you know, at the time, and a very short time after Oren had shot himself, then they kind of checked to see if I'm okay, you know, because I kind of passed the trauma, finding him and all. And they gave me this test, and they said, oh, you're okay, and they sent me to a long shift in that room. And, you know, this was the room where I found him in a pool of blood, and with the bullets that he shot himself, you know, still in the wooden cabinet, you know, behind where I sat in that room. And to spend all this time on your own in this small space was very difficult. And I found myself as if I was in some kind of inner conversation with him, and that I had to justify, why am I not joining him? Why am I not killing myself, you know? And I think this got me to write my first story. You know, I was just sitting there, and you know, when I kind of I printed it on one of the computers in the room, and it was really, really short. It was called Pipes, and that's the first text that I've ever written. It's a story about a guy who works in a pipe factory. And he really, really doesn't like his job. And after hours, he stays at the factory, and he builds himself those odd-shaped pipes, and he rolls marbles through them. He really likes seeing the marbles come in at one end of the pipe and come out at the other. Until one day he builds a really, really complicated pipe with many twists and turns in it, and when he rolls a marble in, it doesn't come out at the other end. At the beginning he thinks that the marble is just stuck, but when he tries it with a few other marbles, he realizes that the marbles are simply disappearing. And it is then that he decides to build himself a huge pipe, you know, exactly in the same shape, and to crawl into it until it disappears. And when he crawls through this giant pipe, he really doesn't know what he's going to see at the other end. And when he reaches the other end, he sees that he reached a place full of people who just couldn't find a place on Earth and had to reach this place for things to start to make sense.
רודי! היי אחי. כתבתי סיפור, אני יכול לעלות אליך שתקרא אותו?
לא, אני ארד למטה, כאילו, נוגה ישנה. בסדר, אני אביא את הכלב.
כלב מלך.
זהו, אז הנה זה הסיפור.
He started reading the story while walking the dog, who wasn't much into walking because the dog just wanted to relieve its doggy urges, but my brother was too much in the story to pay any attention to that.
It's cool. אחלה זה. אחלה סיפור. יש לך עוד עותק של זה?
כן, כן, בטח. ממש אתה אוהב את זה.
ניקח את זה, זרקו בפח.
And I think it was this moment
where I realized that I want to be a writer, that this is what I want to do the rest of my life. I realized that he was telling me something. He was telling me that the story wasn't in the paper. It was in his mind now. And, and we kept on working with him, thinking about it. And I said, wow, this is some kind of magic. You can transform your emotions and thoughts from your mind to somebody else's. And I thought, maybe with this new superpower, maybe I can survive the rest of my compulsory army service. Who knows?
וואי, אחלה סיפור, אתה לא רק סופר, אתה גם יודע לעבוד עם הרבה תמלילים, בואנה, אתה...
אתה רואה, זה עוזי עזר להם. זה לבד בחיים לא הייתי מצליח. איי, איי, איי. And I thought, maybe with this new superpower, maybe I can survive the rest of my compulsory army service. Who knows? Wow. Good. So now you know how he started writing. The end. Roll the credits.
Oh, no, it's not that simple. This is where it starts. Now we want to find out how he creates stories from what happens around him.
Listen, I don't understand any of this fascination you have with storytelling. Don't understand this. And I don't know why you don't just cut it out with this documentary business. Go have some fun. Go to Tel Aviv, to the beach. Hit on some girls, maybe. No? Where did you sleep last night?
At my girlfriend's place.
Your girlfriend?
Yeah?
You have a photo?
Yeah?
On your phone here, you have a photo of your girlfriend.
Yeah. What, I need to show it?
Show me, please. You love her?
Yeah, of course.
In this photo, she looks very normal, regular, boring. Except for this weird haircut. What is this weird haircut? Wait here one moment.
Okay, so this didn't really happen exactly like this, but it feels like it could have.
יש לך מיצים טבעיים? We were 20, I was
It's like 20 years ago.
2 or 3, something like that. 20 years ago, something like that.
I met a girl and I asked her if she could memorize her phone number because I said that I'm too drunk and stoned, I wouldn't remember anything. And I said to her, I met this girl and she gave me a phone number. Could you please remember it for me? And she forgot.
Yeah, I forgot.
I think on purpose.
Maybe.
And then we tried to talk and it was very, very loud. So we couldn't hear each other because the music was very loud. And what I remember is that she said to me, are you staying? And I said, no, I'm going. And then she said to me, kiss me. And I thought, that it would be nice to kiss her, but that it was moving too fast for me. So I said to her, it's so loud here, you want to go out somewhere quiet maybe and have coffee? And she said, okay. She was a little bit disappointed that I didn't kiss her, but she was okay with it. And we sat there and we talked, and then I walked her home, and then I asked her for a date the next day. And after some time when we were together, I said to her that it was really nice, that she was so fearless, and she told me, kiss me, because I never met a girl who was so kind of straightforward. And she said that she didn't say kiss me, she said you never find a taxi. That's how I remember it.
This stuff happens in Edgar's mind. There may be traces of it somewhere else, but there's a beautiful element of kind of mixing of fantasy and fiction and reality and unreality. Isn't that what writing is for? I mean, that's why Jesus made laptops.
With God, most of the inventions are inside the mind. Most of the action is inside the mind. The story would be amazing. There'll be Superman crossing the frame and everything, but in reality, nothing much happened.
Yeah.
How do you remember it?
I don't remember it. Day after we go out and you start to talk and you never end it. You talk and talk and talk and talk.
Some say I still talk. 20 years later.
Edgar is in person very, very much like he is on the page. He is always telling extremely short stories.
He can tell you a story even if you're in a rush, in the middle of a heart attack, in a rush to the hospital. You'll first have to finish the story because he's into it.
I'm trying to think if I've ever heard him do anything else, other than tell a story.
You know, sometimes I can be with him and he talks, and like after 45 minutes, I sort of like have to concentrate, or I want to say, wait a second, Edgar, I want to say something about.
Very early on in our relationship, I went with Shira to meet Uzi.
Yeah, I think it's connected to Fetzo.
About Edgar and Shira, Edgar said that the story Fetzo is.
Yeah, that's a nice story.
The day two after we met, he said, you must know the most close person to me, and Uzi. And he took me to Uzi. Before I met her mother, Uzi. And I think in his mind, he kind of already mixed up to one person.
No, I think it was like a clash because Uzi in a way was my girlfriend,
Yeah.
Because before he was with Shira, we used to go out every night and, go out a lot.
I think that the need to tell stories is basically the need to put some kind of a structure to reality around you. And I feel that the more chaotic and the less sense it makes, the stronger the need I have to tell a story about it.
Everything is a story, ultimately. I'm answering this question as a story. You asked it because you're telling a story. Everything is constantly story. We do the things that we do, sometimes just purely instinctively, but usually because we're pursuing some idea of who we are. We're telling the stories of our lives.
I think that the stories usually come to me in this kind of a place where something in life evokes a strong emotion in you, and you find yourself unable to share this emotion with people around you. I remember once I saw this person, and he was holding a disposable coffee cup and a newspaper under his arm. And every time he wanted to take a sip of the coffee, the newspaper fell. And he would just kind of take the newspaper and put it under his arm again and try to take a sip again, and it fell again. And he kind of, something in his mind, I don't know, he didn't kind of learn from his past mistake, and he kept doing it, And looking at this guy, I was in tears, because this was, I guess, me, because I knew that I was this guy. I knew that all humanity was this guy. That basically, if you try to find the best metaphor for human existence, maybe it's this one. And I came back home and I told that to Shira, and I said to her, I saw the saddest thing. And she said, what was so sad about it? And he's just a stupid guy, you should just put the newspaper somewhere and drink it. It's sad. He's a boy dying from hunger in Biafra. That's sad, this is just dumb, And I think that when you're in this situation where you're overwhelmed by emotion, but you still feel that you can't explain to people what you felt, this is the thing that it's the strongest motivation for me to sit down and write.
There's a great old saying that once upon a time there was a man whose life was so good there's no story to tell about it. So anybody who tells a lot of stories, almost by definition, has a lot of problems, or has encountered a lot of problems, or is just good at recognizing problems in the world. It's not really true that a good storyteller has a problematic life. It's true that a good storyteller recognizes that he lives in a problematic world.
זה סתם שמלמד מה לעשות.
אתה אמרת, אני סתם...
הקשבת לדוד נמרוד.
A few years ago, I was queuing with this American guy to a security check in the airport, And he said to me, you know, before I came to Israel, you know, everybody told me about how it's a dangerous place. But when I came, I just kind of saw a bunch of kind of relaxed, smiley faces. So I said to him, you know what's the difference between Israel and the US? That if there would be such a queue in the US and you ask people on both queues, have you ever experienced a hangover? Then the number of hands raised in the two queues will be the same. But if you ask, have you ever been in a situation in which you killed someone or saw someone die a violent death or was badly hurt or shot in the Israeli one, most people would raise their hand.
I'd be surprised if there's anybody that is not fucked up by the army. At least I am, definitely. I think everybody is. Person in him, I guess too.
How much do you think this situation influenced him as a person?
I'm sure it influenced him, and I think Etgar had a few, I don't remember exactly, but he had a few people that he knew that committed suicide.
It's not because everybody has gone through a war and shot Arab kids or stuff like that. This doesn't happen to most of us, lucky. But just being in this fucked up place where other fucked up people are giving you a bad time is very fucking up, you know?
So many times when I go through something, I try to figure out, you know, it's like kind of like to clean all the unneeded stuff in it and to try to kind of crystallize what was there, you know. Was this experience that I had something that had to do with fear or my need to make people feel good, or the paradox of living in a region that is conflicted and trying to be liberal, you know. I try to take all this noise and kind of make something out of it that is kind of a vehicle that carries a certain emotion in it, and it is a need. And I think that the more I feel that there is a fear that I'll be alienated from my life or bored from my life, the more need I have to dig in it and to find something that is worth keeping. I have this story about a guy that he meets this angel and they become friends. But the angel is the total asshole, you know. He keeps lending money from him and not giving him back the money and getting him into all kind of trouble. But the guy is still happy, you know, because everybody get to have an angel as a friend. And one day they're on a roof and they're kind of sunbathing. And the guy says to the angel, how about you fly a little bit, you know? And he said, nah, I don't want to, like, people are gonna see me. And then the guy, he just leans and looks down and say, hey, you gotta see that. And when the angel comes over, he gives him this little push, kind of wanting to force him to fly. But the moment that he pushes him, the angel falls, like, you know, the entire distance down and crashes on the floor. And when the guy runs down and looks, he sees it. The body is completely still, and only the wings are kind of fluttering. And at that moment, the guy realized that this person was not an angel. He was just a liar with wings.
He's a little bit like somebody who just received like a terrible prognosis from a doctor, you know, who's told he has like 3 months to live.
You know, Etgar is sort of like, he's also a great performer, you know, in fact, and that's part of his storytelling, you know, he loves audiences, he loves it.
When I see Edgar, I just see him sort of rushing off a plane with this big roller bag behind him and rolling it down the hill, you know, rolling it through the airport.
I bet the people who were in the hall didn't even notice that I was on MDMA. And then they said, oh no, they noticed. And his commander claimed that he saw my brother worshiping the totem while my brother was actually tying his shoelaces, but it's a long story, but so I I never sign my name. I do silly illustrations. Yes, it's like so you know in the book there is a bit where I say that the thing is that kind of autographing your book is kind of tricky, so I invented actually this kind of system in which I write to people fake dedications.
I feel like so many people who read your book are gonna ask you to do that.
So a couple did it, but the thing is that I'm kind of post-traumatic. I do it when they ask me, but I'm kind of because I actually got punched for doing one. So I wrote to this girl. I wrote to her, "You may hate me, but we both know the baby is mine." And her boyfriend or husband came. Apparently she had a child, and like he said, "How dare you?"
Oh, jeez. If that was true that you really did get punched?
Yeah, well, it was more kind of slapped, but I like to kind of.
Traveling to Israel was becoming a routine. This time we tried a different approach.
What is the purpose of your visit to Israel?
We're tourists.
Tourists.
Yeah, we want to go to Jerusalem to visit the grave of Jesus and the Wailing Wall, and we want to go to Tel Aviv to see the beach.
Hit on some girls, you know.
And for this you need such a big camera?
Oh yeah, we want to take good quality pictures of all the sites and of ourselves. Maybe you can take a picture of us.
No. Okay, you can go through. Next.
We were astonished. Things go so much easier when you're not entirely truthful.
So would you consider Edgar a liar?
Yeah. Liar. You know, people that are very good with stories tend to make up stories even when you ask them about real stuff.
Yeah, Edgar is a great storyteller. Don't forget that, you know. So don't believe everything he says to you.
He tells stories all the time that I don't believe are true in the journalistic sense, you know? He will, he'll talk about something his son did that his son just didn't do. He just didn't do it.
Yeah, I think statistically it's impossible that he had so many more crazy events than the rest of us. So it means I would think mathematically it has to be the way he tells it and not the actual facts. Unless it's an unbelievable, one long coincidence happening for the last 45 years, which doesn't make any mathematical sense.
You know, so as I'll do with any writer, a writer will tell me something and I'll just cut it in half and say, okay, so half of that happened. But keep telling it like it is, because the interesting part is the other half that you add.
We are now in Kobe's apartment. Kobe and Uzi are my childhood friends. I know Uzi since he was 3 years old, and I know Kobe since he was 9, I think.
7.
7?
Maybe 7 or 8. It's something.
Yeah, I don't remember when was the first time you punched me, but no, I'm just
didn't
kidding.
punch you.
Never. If you would punch me, I wouldn't be here. Because you don't know, you know.
I don't punch anybody.
I mean, people don't know, but Kobe is really Ramat Gan, my hometown's only superhero. He's basically invulnerable. You cannot hurt him. He's bulletproof, he's knife-proof, but since we're not allowed to use firearms in his apartment, we will just revert to punching, kicking, and strangling.
התחזקתי? ככה. Nothing, okay? You can. And also here, look.
Die!
תראה, הוא גם חזק.
He's really, he's the new step in human evolution. We're gonna send him to Mars, and the new race of Kobe's is gonna conquer the universe. Oh, so the thing about him is that I wrote this piece about him, and in the piece I wrote as a child how he had a weapon museum. What's special about it?
They make it very special for me because you can shoot with this automatically.
It's like
you don't put a lot of
pressure. You just
pressure.
touch it and
It's simple touch.
And I wrote all this about him, and it was published in the New York Times live section. And in the New York Times live sections, they got this kind of thing called fact checker, you know.
Someone called me and asked me some stuff. It was from New York. From the New York Times. And he wanted to check if what Etgar wrote is true. So I told him yes, everything, every word was true, and don't play with Etgar. Be careful that.
And he said, "So what's exactly your profession? Like you kind of call people's friend and you insinuate that your friends are liars? That's what you do for a living?" So the guy said, no, I don't want to put it this way, you know, I'm doing something else. So he said, no, so if you like facts so much, here's a fact for you. I'm right outside the Ben Gurion airport in Tel Aviv, and if I get on a plane, I can get to your apartment, knock on your door, say hello to you, and return after buying 2 cartons of cigarettes in the duty-free, and not even a day would pass. So the guy said to him, "Hey, can I hang out right now because I have another call?" And my friend was very happy about this kind of conversation and outcome, but I was a little bit stressed because, you know, like the New York Times sometimes ask me to write pieces for them, and I kind of like it when this happens. And then as I talk to him, I see that I get an email from the New York Times, and the email said, because we've published you for so many years, and we know that you're trustworthy, we find the fact-checking process redundant in this case. So I always tell the truth, and if you think I don't tell the truth, then Kobe will convince you that I am telling the truth.
Yeah, no, it's okay, you're telling the truth. Okay.
So it's hard to get to the real truths with Etgar?
Well, what is the real truth? That's a good question, you know, I mean, I think for him, in a way, it's the real truth, even if it's a little bit made up, you know, if it's a bit stretched out, or, you know what I mean?
If he wanted to tell you exactly what bothers him, it's really boring. Yeah. So he tells you something else that has the essence of it.
One of my favorite stories is Lyland. I love Lyland. It's about a boy called Robbie.
Hey, I know you. You're Robbie.
No, I'm not.
Yes, he is.
And one day his mother sends him out to buy cigarettes for her at a local shop. Instead, Robbie decides to buy something for himself. He hides the change under a stone in the garden and tells his mother that a redhead kid punched him on the way over and stole all the money. This way he discovers that lying can get him out of trouble. He grows up to be an amazing liar. When he wants to skip a class, he tells his high school teacher that his aunt is in a wheelchair. When he comes late for work, he tells his boss that he hit a dog with his car. Robbie told dozens of lies. Violent ones, sad ones, horrific ones, never expecting to be confronted with them again. Then one night, he has a strange dream about this money under the stone, and he decides to go back and look for it. This is how Robbie enters Lieland. The first thing he sees is a redhead kid, punches him, this time for real, and says, "I'm your first lie." While Robbie is still unsure about what happened, he sees a German shepherd in the far distance with crippled back legs dragging himself across the floor. He realizes that all his horrible lies are alive in this place, suffering because of him.
And the moral of the story is not stop lying, but start lying. If you lie now, only lie about positive things. Don't say your aunt had cancer or your aunt was blind. Say your aunt won the lottery or something really great happened to her.
Etgar lives in a part of the world where everything is hyperbole and exaggeration. And if people do it, use that for evil, why can't he use it for good?
He's the kind of liar who tries to lie in order to make you understand the truth better, as opposed to evil liars who want you to understand the truth less.
A liar is somebody who is like taking advantage of the truth, or it implies a kind of like deliberateness and a bad spirit. And I think Etgar veers from the truth all the time, but always with a generous spirit, like in the interest of either making things brighter or more vivid, or I think more often in the effort to like communicate what he really means.
The authenticity of stories does not come from the fact that, you know, that the bus line really goes according to the municipality plan. It's the fact that they talk about things that are true, talk about emotions and feelings and yearnings that are true, you know. And I think that, you know, throughout history, people were very much influenced by fairy tales, by fantasy stories, just for the fact that not because they believed that those things actually happened, but they felt that the emotions that they propel those actions or that create this reality were emotions that were authentic and human and relevant for their lives.
I think that after a story is written, one of the things that interests me the most is kind of to try to backtrack and say what happened in real life made me write the story, and then kind of try to compare between what happened in real life and what happens in the fiction story.
Yeah.
And many times, like factually, they're totally different, but in essence, they feel the same. And there was a story that I think was on the show called Healthy Start.
Oh, that's right.
That I wrote the story in a time where I was in Berlin. I was a guest professor there. I got an email from my German publisher, and he invited me to meet him in Berlin. He was from Munich, but he said, "We've never met. I'm going to take a train just so I can see you." And I went there, and when I went there, I saw it was really huge, a very big place, and I realized that I don't know how it looks like.
Right.
So I had a plan. I said I'd take a table kind of watching the door, and the moment anyone who comes in and he looks like a German publisher, you know, then I waved to him, and if he waves back, it must be him. And the first guy who came had this kind of good but old suit, which is very kind of publisher-like, you know, they want to look well, but at the same time don't have money, can't afford a new one.
Yeah.
And he had this kind of, what seemed to be a heavy leather bag that, you know, publishers there, they have books, so it kind of made sense. So I waved to him, and he kind of waved back and smiled this big smile, and came and he sat at the table, and immediately started speaking to me in English. And he said to me, "It's great that we finally meet." And I said, yeah, you know, it's wonderful. And he said, "I'll be honest with you," he said, "I think I've reread your last email about 100 times." And I was kind of trying to remember what I wrote there. And I remembered that I wrote to him that I can't make it 11:30, so let's meet at noon. And I thought, well, this guy must be deep, you know, like if he keeps rereading it, what does he see in it? You know, I hope he doesn't see anything bad about me. And I said, okay, okay, and so you read it, and what do you think after reading it so many times? And he said, I'll be honest with you. I can't give you 320,000 euros, but I have it with me right here, and then he kind of tapped his leather bag, 270,000.
In the bag?
In the bag. And I give them to you, only I have to see the diamonds first. And I looked at him and I said, Geo, because that's the name of my publisher. And he looked at me and he said, Samir? Because that was the name of the guy I was supposed to meet. And like, it was kind of an awkward moment. And then he got up with his bag and he started kind of walking.
That's the part of the story that's true?
Yeah, yeah.
That's crazy.
And he started kind of walking backwards.
That's the part of the story that seems like it's made up.
No, 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 that's true. And in the end, the story comes out totally different, but...
Yeah.
So the story is about a guy named Avichai, who's just been dumped by his girlfriend. And he visits the same breakfast place every morning, sits at the same spot, and eats her by himself. Then one day, an opportunity presents itself to him. The last person who'd smiled at Avichai had been his ex-girlfriend. So before he knows it, he smiles back. Meir, the guy says, sorry I'm late. Avichai finds himself saying, what's 10 minutes? I thought about the deal, the guy says. Can we make it 400? Avichai thinks, considers what to do, and answers, no, 480. I gotta feed my kids, you know? Okay, Jesus, they told me you were tough. 460, and I owe you a favor. From that day on, it happens almost routinely. Avichai takes a seat, keeps on the lookout for any new person who comes to the cafe with an expectant look. This way, he can live an endless amount of lives. He meets a silicon-lipped prostitute who wants to work shorter hours. He meets a big guy with heavy eyebrows who threatens to take him to court. He meets a girl who's disappointed, says he looks nothing like his profile picture. Avichai gets more and more comfortable pretending to be somebody else. Then, after almost a month, he's eager to meet his next encounter. I was sure you wouldn't show, says the older man. And yet, here I am, Avichai replies. As I said on the phone, I want you to stop seeing her, the man tells him. But I can't. I love her. Yes, you can and you will. We both love her, but I happen to be her husband. You have no idea what my life has been like, Avichai pleads. Hell. Not even hell. Just one big, stale chunk of nothing. When you're living with nothing, and then something turns up, you can't just tell it to go away. Are you okay, man? The waiter asks. Avichai nods, slowly. He tries to imagine himself with that woman, the one he'll never see again. And for a moment, he almost succeeds. His whole body aches. He feels alive.
But do you think it's possible that the real story that you just told me is actually more powerful than the fiction story?
And do you think it makes it better, the fact that it's true?
I think it's weird. I'd have to look back at the original story. It's funny. It'd be interesting to write them side by side because I think like it is really powerful. It's really powerful. Just like you know how you've told me that Fatso is actually about Shira. It's actually about when you guys first got together. It would be so interesting to write the thing that really happened and have it sit there as a match. You know what I mean? Like right next to the Fatso, which is like one of my favorite stories I've ever read, ever. And it's it's so pure. But that you would tell like two anecdotes about Shira from those days that I would realize like, oh, this is exactly the same story as this. And I don't know, like there's a weird kind of juice that the fact that something's true gives the thing that
so yeah,
and the fact that you're saying I have to dumb down the facts. Listen to what you said. I have to make the facts less spectacular because I have to convince you that it's real because it's fiction. That's crazy talk.
What I think is that, you know, in the fiction story, the end, that he gets beaten by a husband who thinks that he cheats with his wife, and he says to him, stop seeing her, and he refuses to say, and while he gets beaten, he feels that he gets beaten for something. And I think there's something in the story that if I go back to the real story, the things that I had this sensation that I really wanted to say to him, if I could backtrack, I say, what's this you want to see the diamond first? Yeah. So I really wanted to say to him.
There's trust or there's not trust.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that bothered me really, it wasn't that I was trying to corner him, is that we are having such a nice conversation, and then suddenly you say, what? Like, you think I'd drink coffee with you and then I'm gonna fuck you? Like, you know, and you think I'm this kind of guy? I don't think you're this kind of, I believe that you have money in your bag. Believe in me, you know? So there is something about it that kind of like, you know, that we enter this kind of sphere, and in this sphere I wanted us, you know, to be friends, you know, not to be suspicious.
I understand.
And in a sense, if I would have done that, I could have gotten beaten for that. Like,
Totally.
Because I wouldn't have the diamonds, and in some sense, he would stop being my friend, you know?
He would.
Because he was Samir's friend, he wasn't mine. But still, there was a part of me that wanted to do that, and I think that the entire writing of the story of fiction is trying to explore that. So in the story, when the guy gets beaten, it's basically me getting beaten because I was willing to do that to kind of protect this feeling of belonging to something that made human sense.
Yeah.
He is really like, he seems to be always engaged in this kind of battle with senselessness. You know, whether it's the senselessness of his parents' experience historically, or the senselessness of his own life, or what is the sense of the world around us.
I have quite a few stories in which people commit suicide, but I would like to argue that I think that all of them are kind of pro-life. I think that there is always this kind of feeling of maybe empathizing with the sentiments of a person who would want to kill himself, but at the same time, some kind of undercurrent saying, you know what, but maybe we should keep trying. Before my friend Owen had killed himself, and I was very young, and I remember he gave me a lift in his car, and we reached my parents' apartment where I stayed during my army service. We had this conversation, you know, in which he basically said to me, if you could just give me a good reason to live, you know, then I'd keep on doing that. And I just couldn't come up with this kind of winning argument saying, you know, you should live because life is groovy, you know? But I think that there was something in discovering writing that was some kind of an answer to why I choose life.
I think it's just how he gives his life meaning. You know, how he organizes things in such a way that he can then share them. There's something about it that's much deeper than just pleasure, although he's really funny and really pleasurable to be with. But there's a generosity in his storytelling. You know, some people tell stories in a way that like sucks up the oxygen in the room. And he tells them in such a way that it like introduces more oxygen into the room. It makes people feel comfortable. It makes them feel boisterous. It makes them feel often like storytellers themselves.
או נינט, או אלוויס פרסלי, כל דמות שהיא בעצם דמות...
You know, even I'm, she's not my wife because we never married, but my lady, my love of my life, or however we want to call her, keeps saying I'm exaggerating all the time. And I tell her I don't see what's so bad about exaggerating because, you know, it just makes the story nicer, you know, so why not? So I think Etgar exaggerates all the time.
And Kobe, I remember, would walk with Uzi, they would go home, and you would have this stick. I remember you had a stick, like a baseball bat.
I don't remember.
There is another story about Kobe, and
I stayed home.
We got into a fight with another group of kids from another school.
No, I was there.
You was there?
בל"ג בעומר, of course.
כן, בל"ג בעומר, באלכוהול.
שכאלה דרור מזרק לו אבן בראש, פתח אותו לזה.
נכון, בגלל זה...
No, it was not the
At the same time, when he took the pistol, yeah, when he threw the axe and he shot the pistol, I remember.
No, it was not that, it was different day, you're confusing things.
So it's another day that you threw an axe at somebody?
אני לא חושב, לא?
No, I tell the story. I remember you were not there, okay? You were sick at home. It was not on the day of ל"ג בעומר.
Before ל"ג בעומר.
No, it was before.
ל"ג בעומר, אדגר צודק, אתה טועה.
שפתחו לו את הראש מהמגדל הגבוה במעגל.
נכון, והיה את הבית הישן הזה.
No, you're mixing two different stories. It's not the same story, okay? Listen, this happened in different years. It was in a different year.
I want to write stories that people who would read them would like mankind a little bit more. So in a way, I guess there was something about my stories. They are kind of like an advertisement for life. You know, it's a kind of life. You should try it sometimes, you know. You're already 50 years old. Don't you want to feel what life is like, you know? And you know, and I think maybe it's not a coincidence that it was only after his death that I started writing stories.
I have also a story like this one. It was my birthday. And
For a board when you have to eclipse.
And they connected him to this kind of machine. They discovered that he moves his feet in his sleep. And they calculated that every night he sleeps, it's like he's walking like 8 kilometers.
Wow.
Because he goes like this when he sleeps.
When we were on the airport and we got this interview by the security. No, we're gonna shoot a documentary on Etgar, and they said, so you're shooting? With what?
From the airport saying, I have a couple of Dutch guys here. I'm calling from the airport. I have a couple of Dutch guys, and I was in the computer. I was saying, I don't know. I have nothing to do with it.
They didn't believe us. They were like, oh, you're shooting a documentary about Etgar Keret. You two guys, you know, it's like
You two Dutch guys.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a good way to start film with this scene. Like a Garson.
When she says that no, that it will be the first scene in the film, that you should be more reluctant. You know that you are half polite or something because you're too eager.
So I think it's a good way to maybe to start your film.
Yeah, well, let's see. I'm not sure if it will work. It's
Maybe it's a bad idea.
yeah.
But this was even worse.
Because I think that if you see it in the end and you saw it in the beginning, then if you can say this is
Hello, everyone. Hope you all enjoyed that film, and I hope you have a lot of interesting things to discuss. I'll just remind you of the questions I asked beforehand, but if there are other things that you'd want to talk about with respect to the film, please go ahead. Discuss the meaning of the film's title based on a true story. How does this title relate to the style of the film in its subject matter and storytelling? And how does truth relate to Keret's work? How does it relate to the film also, which is a documentary and is supposed to be based in fact, reality, and truth? So now we're going to send you into your breakout rooms. You will have to use the Zoom link that's posted in the chat room, or the Zoom link that was sent to you earlier. And if you have any issues, Naomi will be behind in the webinar to help you out. We'll see you in the breakout rooms.